comment period again. And the first two cards I have up here are Greg Hall and Bill Moniz. And I really apologize if I'm mispronouncing your names. Greg Hall, I think I got that one. Bill Moniz is next.
Ken, nice talking to you. I'm a resident in Montecito. You know, we're a hillside community, and we really, you know, we have three types of, we really have three residential zoning districts within our town. We have R144, R120, and R18. Okay, and that kind of controls the density. Our biggest issue in terms of the RHNA, we've really wanted clarification. And in talking to you, you know, you're kind of explaining that the RHNA is more for more urban kind of areas versus rural. But I guess what we would kind of want to know is, you know, there's no judicial review for this. There's really no second guessing. There's no, you know, way to talk to ABAG after the process is done. And there's been cases. I mean, judicial review was refused, City of Irvine versus SCAG. And then if we annex, okay, an area for the housing element, we open ourselves up for litigation, Haro v. Solana Beach. I guess what I'm asking is, can you offer some guidance in terms of implementing housing element in the RHNA? Would you be willing to help me? I'll give you my card.
Certainly we can follow up with Montecito and answer the particular questions you have, but just generally, again, for the audience, so the RHNA is the Regional Housing Need Allocation. This is a state mandate, it's a state law, it's existed for, I believe, roughly 25 years. The Association of Bay Area Governments, like other councils of governments in other regions in California, is responsible for implementing the Regional Housing Need Allocation through the jurisdictions in the Bay Area. I joke sometimes when I speak and refer to it as a much-loved state mandate, because I can assure you that it's not in many quarters. The requirement is that the state of California provides a housing allocation to each region in the state. The councils of government are then responsible for allocating that to the jurisdictions in the region, and there's a state requirement that it's distributed across very low, moderate, and above moderate income categories. The direction that this region went for the last allocation for the 2007 to 2014 period was to direct more of the growth, and this was done through the Housing Methodology Committee, which is some local elected officials, local staff, other participants from a variety of organizations, and that was ultimately adopted by the ABAG Executive Board, which is all elected officials, was to have let me try to answer this question. They're from a range of economic development, affordable housing, environmental organizations, and others. It's quite a long list, which we could get you. But the approach that was taken was to direct more of the growth to areas served by transit and larger urban centers to try to do essentially a lot of the requirements of SB 375, even though it was prior to SB 375. Now the regional housing need allocation is being updated again, and the requirement is that it be linked to the sustainable community strategy, the long-term plan. That's a long way of saying that smaller communities such as Montecito should see, if it goes forward as it has been discussed and in keeping with the law, relatively small allocations, and larger jurisdictions and transit-served jurisdictions would see more. That's one piece. Another is that for nearly all jurisdictions in the region, this period, which is 2015 to 2020, it's the next 8 years.
Yeah.
It's the next 8-year period. for better or worse, the housing elements should be relatively easy to adopt, in part because there's been so little housing developed in recent years, and this is a planning process. There's no requirement to build, so in many communities they're going to be able to largely take the housing elements that were done last time, and a lot of that can be entered into the new one. The last thing I'll say is that the State of California Housing Community Development Department that provides us with a big number that we then have to work with the region to allocate regionally, actually, in my view, did some good work of really looking at vacancy rates, foreclosures, the amount of existing housing that is available statewide, including in the Bay Area, and that factored into the allocation that we're likely to receive, which is going to be lower than last time, so that the jurisdictional numbers on the whole should be lower as well. But in terms of specific issues to Monte Sereno, I'd be happy to discuss that with you, or have someone from my staff try to work with you.
Thank you, Ken.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Alrighty. Bill Moniz and Chris Parkinson are the next two speakers.
Hello. My first question is regarding your frequently asked questions, number 14 on social and environmental justice. Can you explain to us what some of the ways you're going to identify and address the disproportionately high and adverse human health or environmental effects of the program and policies on the minority population? That's my first question, is how are you going to decide that? What are the factors involved in coming up with determining how to address this particular policy? And then the second question is, you had mentioned that you're going to take all of our inputs into council when you make your decisions and so forth. How can we be assured that you're actually going to take any of the things that we've talked about into consideration? What kinds of information are you going to publish? How are you going to determine whether 10 people have said that they want this and that's sufficient because you've only talked to 1,000 people out of 7 million in the Bay Area? So besides the preconceived plans you already have, how can we be assured that you're going to really follow what the people are requesting? Doug?
On the social justice question,
Lean into the mic so we can hear there.
there's the definition there. So basically what we're going to be looking at is the identified minority and low-income populations and non-minority and non-low-income populations, and compare their access to and travel time to essential destinations by auto and by transit. Also, we'd be looking at exposure to emissions and some other factors related to automobile and transit. So basically, what the social justice federal requirement is it says that income and minority need to share in the benefits and burden of the plan, and this is primarily talking about transportation access equally.
What happened to equal justice? What happened to equal justice?
And so-
It's not a social justice country.
Okay.
It's equal
When your card is called,
Would
you
you like to
can.
explain?
So let me just address that real quickly.
Okay.
I mean, that's what it is that the plan and the facilities that are being built as part of the plan aren't a burden, excessive burden to areas of low income and minority, traditionally been subject to displacement and emission impacts as a result of transportation facilities are built. So that's what it's about, is sharing equally in the benefits and the burden of the transportation investment.
All right. Can we move on? We've got a couple more.
Second part of the question, I can try to answer that quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You'll see there are note takers here at every meeting. Every question is being taken down, every comment is being taken down. This is being recorded. A big part of what staff is going to be doing after these workshops is saying this is what we heard at the public workshops, and that will be presented to the MTC and ABAG elected officials in terms of this is what we heard at the public workshops. And certainly, it's an input into the draft preferred scenario.
Has he heard it at public forums with the MTC and the ABAR?
Just to supplement what Ken said, all of the notes that we're collecting tonight, from the comment cards, from these notes that are being taken in each of the stations, are being transcribed. I think I mentioned that to you, and posted on the One Bay Area website as we go. So you can check there. Please. And the spring workshops, I think there's the same level of information provided there. So please, check that. If you don't see your comments up there, then please, get in touch with us and let us know.
And
Okay, Chris. Sorry, Doug.
Let me add to that. The schedule that Lou had shown previously on March, it's the second Friday in March. I think it's the 19th. The 11th.
Tonight.
Second Friday, our committee meets. On March, we're going to be bringing to them the comments that we've heard at these meetings. So I would encourage you all to attend if you can make it.
What was the date on that?
It's March 9th. The meeting will most likely be, it's been moving around a little bit, but it'll be between 9 or 10 a.m.
Everybody works.
It's planned that way.
You're paid their salaries.
Chris, are you Chris?
Okay, I'll wait till it quiets.
All right, let's go. Chris is up next.
Okay.
And Scott, plain Scott is next. Okay.
Chris Parkinson, I'm a real estate broker in Mountain View. And I'm going to make a statement, and then I'd like to add it with a question. Are we here tonight to announce ourselves as community leaders, or are we just here to argue tonight? I'm going to do 5 hours per month in support of an extraordinary individual from the BART. Robert Allen supports the 5 county-linked growth initiatives. I just want to say no one else need do anything if you don't want to. I'm doing 5 hours per month in the community as part of my leadership job. And if anyone else would like to do that as well, I'd encourage it. I've been looking at your draft proposal here, the target scores, and I see that we have both BART and we have Caltrain funding. I would like to see that we can eliminate Caltrain funding and that we can just strictly do BART funding.
Okay.
And if we can please look at that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Or Chris, rather. Scott, and then Ralph F.
Good evening. Talked to you guys before. This is my 4th meeting. It's great that you guys make adjustments. I see that you now have the ground rules. The other night I did ask if you would put the questions in a PowerPoint, display them up there, show us where they're at, and a possible solution date or an answer date, and what department's working on them. You guys did that work in a week. Why is Tina still up here writing on a white piece of paper? Then we can see what questions have already been asked. That would be very nice. Social equity was asked about the other night. You had a great, and tonight.
I asked that question in room A, transportation.
Excellent.
Wait. The person up there didn't know the answer.
You're correct. They didn't know.
The person I asked told me I should join a social equity group, and what does it mean to me?
Right.
She would not answer.
Exactly. And that question has been asked for a week and a half. You guys have plenty of time to research that.
Well, make it up.
No. We will know the answer. Mr. Kinsey, you're paid a very handsome salary. I know what you make. We talked about that the other night. 3 minutes. People in Contra Costa County got 3 minutes the other night. We get 2. Is that social equity? Social justice. I love it when you guys bring things up and I can come up with a question. Burden. Define burden. We have 7 million people here in the state of California. You want to know what burden is? My wife is totally and completely disabled unable to communicate. I used outreach. Outreach was a mess. I had to go out and buy a van so I could transport my wife to doctor's appointments. Can your plan, oh, he left. The little SkyTrain thing, I looked into that. No handicap access. Your whole plan
Scott, that's your
is
time.
going to be doubled because of handicap access.
Thank you, Scott.
Let's get the answers up there. These people deserve answers. And I'll tell you what, it would help out with they could look up there and see that the question's been asked. And they could say, where's it at? Save you guys a lot of time.
Okay. Ralph, followed by Dennis Katanik.
Good evening, gentlemen. I wrote this morning down some questions. One of the things that, because you're bringing the federal government into this, which has got us heading towards 16 trillion of indebtedness and heading for 24 without a doubt. The numbers currently are at, I owe $135,000 for the current debt at 15 trillion. If I assume that it's going to increase exponentially to 124, every taxpayer, if you were honest, if the government was honest anymore, if the state was honest anymore, every one of us would be sitting with a bill at our desk or at our table, kitchen table, that said $130,000. If there's two earners in, it would be $270,000, excuse me. California is in debt, depending on what day Governor Brown gets up and decides the number should be, is anywhere from 15 to 30. But that doesn't count all the pension money we owe. So why don't we, if you really want to be honest with people, and you're asking for more subsidies, you're asking for more sales tax, you're not being honest. 1,000 people maybe get to these meetings. In our last meeting, I hope it's online now, you agreed that you would show that, is it online?
I don't think.
The Dublin meeting, it would be online, that you would show a flow chart. So because you told me that the city is lying to me that they have to do what they're doing in Pleasanton.
So, Ralph, your time.
Okay. And I just want to do one quick thing, please, since I'm being so respectful. What is sustainable to me is education. Giving kids an education. Governor Brown wants to cut it. But it's okay to subsidize.
And it's okay for the illegals.
What is sustainable is once you get that education, that you work, you have discipline, and you have perseverance. And that you learn fiscal responsibility. And that you have some level of acceptable moral and ethical behavior. What is not sustainable is a lack of education. What is unsustainable is blindly following an elitist-driven action plan by a mere handful or several handfuls of people that we don't even know who they are, except for those maybe in this room.
Ralph, please respect the
Systems and
round,
programs, and this is my final comment. Systems and programs that systematically have to be subsidized in an ever-expanding state and federal government means that at some point, there's no more money. Do you guys understand that? Do you understand it? It's a question I would like each of you to just give an answer. Do you understand at some point, if everything is subsidized, growing exponentially, that pretty soon there's no more money, and the poor people are going to be...
Okay, Ralph, thank you.
Answer the question, please. I would like an answer.
All right, Dennis Katanik and Andrea McKenzie, please.
Unbelievable. And there you go.
answer the question.
Dennis, where is Dennis?
Oh my God.
Can't you think of
Dennis Kitanik, are you here?
I am here right now, and I'm waiting for you to answer the previous
I'm going to try to bring this answer back to Plan Bay Area, which is what this public workshop is about. As was discussed earlier, there was an initial vision scenario that was released back in March of 2011, and it looked at a level of housing and a level of transportation that if there were resources, a higher level of resources that can be now identified, it could be a potentially good way for the region to grow in a number of ways. There are not the resources for the region to grow in that way. And the preferred scenario, and this is a federal requirement, it will need to be, from a transportation perspective, it will need to be financially constrained. And much of what the housing that will be called for in the regional housing need allocation, the short-term plan, as well as the longer-term sustainable community strategy, will need to be provided by the market, and it will be choice-based. There is not a call for new subsidies attached to Plan Bay Area.
So Dennis, you're next.
Yeah.
Your 2 minutes, and then Andrea McKenzie will be following you.
Okay. Well, first of all, earlier you brought up the question of relocating people to where there's transit and into urban areas. Well, first of all, how are you going to accommodate, how are you going to cram 9 million people into a tiny area near transit? How are you planning to build high-density housing, like because your plan definitely, all of the 5 plans that I looked at, they require you to build high-density housing and to accommodate all those people. And trust me, I've lived in one of those, so I know what I'm talking about. What you're talking about is making people live in tiny one-room apartments several stories high without any kind of access to open space. Instead of a backyard, you got a balcony. No place for people to play with their kids. No place to walk your dog. Nothing like that. And I ask you, I ask all of you, first of all, is that what you want? I want to ask everyone, is that how you want to live here in this And second, and for you people, since apparently nobody wants to live like that, how are you going to make them move to that high-density housing? Or are you just going to take taxpayer money and pay for housing that nobody wants to live in? That's not. I'm not from. I didn't live in China. I lived in Russia, but it's pretty much the same thing.
Dennis, I think that was your time.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Andrea, and then Gabriel.
Mackenzie, are you here? Okay. Gabriel? Followed by Peter, sorry, Sonis? Sorrel? Soros? Right here. Okay. Sorry.
I don't really have a question. I was listening to you talking about, giving what I assume you thought was an answer to whomever asked it. And what occurred to me is that nobody in this room, I mean, aside from the protesters, really seems to understand that it's not American what you're doing. It doesn't seem like you even have occurred to you that your notion of central planning my life, of some regional power committee deciding how this region, whatever that means, I'm not even sure what that means, that you have a right to do that, that's a good idea. Has anybody even considered the fact that we should be free to decide what we want, the free market should be deciding all of this stuff, and that this is really a wild, crazy, anti-American notion that you're discussing here? It doesn't seem to me with anybody ever questioning that. I don't understand it. I know you guys are probably doing what you think is best, but so did the Politburo. And the guys from Romania and from Russia get it. They see what you're doing as the same thing. Not you individually or you individually, but the notion that central planning is a good idea, that it's a new idea. Wow, what a cool plan. We'll get everybody together, we'll get this like super duper great committee together and we'll organize the whole Bay Area. Nobody's ever thought of that before. Except all of Eastern Europe. And it sucked.
Okay. Just before you, Peter's going to be our last comment before we take one more break to allow the next station to join us.
And I'd like to respond.
Okay.
Relative to the last two speakers. I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that, with the gentleman who spoke previously, if what he said was what was happening, that would indeed be frightening. No one is going to be required to move anywhere. That isn't American, and that's not going to happen, and there is no basis to do that.
Well, just require
To a large, if I may respond, to a large extent, if you look at the plans that have been developed in cities around the region, some cities, not all cities, but cities including San Jose, including the neighborhood we're in right now, that is the single most significant input to any of the scenarios we've worked on. The North San Jose plan involved a lot of work on the part of the city of San Jose in looking at how housing and employment could be accommodated here over time to change what is right now largely an office-oriented environment to one that would have jobs and housing and provide parks and amenities and so forth for people who would choose to live here. Living in, multi-family housing is not for everyone. And single-family neighborhoods in these scenarios have largely, or actually completely, been avoided. We're looking at areas where there's capacity near transit to provide options for people who want this option. In doing so, it should take some pressure off of smaller communities that don't want to grow, that don't want to see their open space develop. By maximizing and using the transit network we have, it should take some pressure off of the road network in terms of congestion and so forth that people don't like. So if you like single-family neighborhoods, if you like small-town life, if you like that to remain intact, there is a lot about the sustainable community strategy, the general approach that the region is building upon, which is largely coming from local jurisdictions, that you should find beneficial. I think if there's one shortcoming of the public workshops is that by not talking about those individual pieces for this round, I think we end up talking at sort of this level, and we're not getting down to the level of what is actually being said in the scenarios. And I can understand why people would find that frustrating. But given a lot of what people have talked about, I think there are actually many elements of this that are in keeping with some of the issues that are being raised. Okay, thank you.
A lot of single-family houses near transit. Are you going to tear them all down?
No, we're not.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Peter Soule, and I guess far more eloquent speakers have come before me. Sam Liccardo, Councilman, and everyone else here. I also share what you're feeling here, sir, gentlemen, gentleladies, is the angst that we all feel, and it isn't just from Plan 1 Bay Area, okay? I went up and I testified in front of the CPUC and PG&E about smart meters. Now, even if you don't believe, and I'm not getting into smart meters here, okay, but only to say that that's another area of angst that I have as a citizen, because they can control my appliances even if there are no health problems with PG&E. Smart grid, smart meters. And PG&E is coming around to the point where maybe we better allow our consumers to have their analog meters. And I still have my analog meter. And but we're seeing this coming from all directions, not just from you, not just from tonight, not just from those that are attending a lot of these meetings. HR 1540, where they're stripping our Constitution away from us, for those that do pay attention, for those who are informed. The fact that an American citizen on American soil can be detained by the American military, put in a military prison, and President Obama says he will not enforce the full impact of that law against American citizens. So relying upon a verbal promise of the President of the United States. I read this stuff, and your intentions are probably all well and good. The other point that I'm trying to make is California competes with the rest of the world and with the rest of the United States. I have fantasy dreams about Texas, living in the hill country of Texas. My family's been in California for 4 generations. Both Sions, my both grandfathers helped build this state. Soule Steele and R.N. Burgess, who helped build Contra Costa County. I hate to think of leaving this state because of what we're doing here. Thank you.
We're going to take our 5-minute break. This is your chance, if you'd like, to move on to one of the other stations. And also for those who are at the other stations to come and join our conversation. Just to let you know, I have 7, 8.